Well, time now to have a look at the headlines making the front pages of the international newspapers. And I'm joined by Zimbabweans, I should say, Thamsanqa Zhou, the journalist, and the news analyst, Dorcas Gwata. Welcome to the programme, both of you. The story that's sort of dominating most of the international papers is, of course, Nepal. And if we start with Shanghai Daily, those images, awful, natural disaster, Dorcas?
A country I happened to travel around last year. There are 4 counties here between Kathmandu and Pokhara. And Pokhara is actually the very small city where travellers travel to the base camp before they move up to the wider mountains. Extremely beautiful country, beautiful people. The impact here will be huge because it is mountainous and the villages are stacked, and some of them are very, very beautiful temples, by the way, which are all many of them are UNESCO protected. So the catastrophe on the ground will be very much felt here. It couldn't happen to a more beautiful people. It's lovely to see the international community coming together. Its neighbours, India and Pakistan,
and of course it's going to be internationally felt as well because so many people travel to Nepal and so many people have Everest in their sights. Tam, if we look at the Times of India again, they're covering the story because the quake was felt obviously across the border. Yeah,
and there are people that died in India and also people that died with, at border with China. But I wanted to focus on the scientific and what is being said, that place is quite vulnerable because of the moving train plates. Yeah, and the other problem that was there is that the understanding is this was a very shallow quake, which is more devastating, although the magnitude you're talking about 7.8, 7.9, that's higher than Haiti. And we know, you just recall the problems that were there in Haiti and the devastation that was there for years to come. The numbers are growing. Now we understand that we're getting to about 2,000 that are confirmed dead. Within the village, especially Kathmandu village, the valley, is terrible over there. But there are also many nationalities that are there, and there are current rescue operations and helicopters that are going to the base camp, and we know that some of the people that died there were British. So it's quite a sad situation in Nepal. Yeah, very, very, very devastating.
If we move to the Sunday Telegraph, this is looking at Anzac Day, the commemorations of the battle that took place, the amphibious onslaught, where many Australians and New Zealanders lost their lives along with the Allied troops in Gallipoli. Dorcas?
It's a very symbolic day. This is an annual, it's a very symbolic day for this nation, celebrated globally. Wherever Australians are, and they are very much travellers, they will take time to celebrate, and very symbolically. It's very sweet to hear this man, Garnet Tobin's 97 years old, say he wouldn't go into a wheelchair. He would walk the day. And I think that's very much testament to the meaning of this event. So very moving, but it's also very sweet that people take time to remember these events. In a world where we are so troubled, in a world where so many other things are moving along very, very, very quickly, it's very, very sweet to see this.
It is arguably probably Australia's most celebrated, and I use that term loosely, but celebrated event, their sort of equivalent to Remembrance Sunday.
Yeah, and it's not only in Australia. We know that in the United Kingdom, the political leadership took time off from their campaign trails.
Yesterday we saw things happening at Westminster Abbey early morning.
And beyond. I think New Zealand, Australia, there are so many places where this is celebrated, and it's also important that it was coming at similar time when Armenia were also doing their own anniversary commemorations about what happened in 1915.
Well, we're going to come to that in a minute.
So it's kind of a day that reminds people that war is not a nice thing.
No.
And I think people like Garnet, when they talk about what happened then, it's quite sad, and many lives are lost.
Well, let's move to the Jerusalem Post and talk about the Armenian massacre. Israel now saying that, it's time to recognise what happened.
And Turkey is in a difficult position because if they admit that this was in fact a genocide, there are legal implications to that. also moral implications.
Yes, it's actually erased from Turkish history books. It doesn't exist.
It doesn't, but actually we've got some momentum here in Turkey. Listen, 10, 15 years ago, this was a hush-hush. We don't talk about this never happened. So now we're at a stage where we're actually at least discussing it. It'll be a while before, if ever, they admit that there was a genocide. But we're seeing similar killings around the world, which very much resemble the definition of genocide. But Turkey's in a difficult position, not even least geographically. They have a lot of relationships within their region which they need to maintain for their own security.
I think it has yet to be described as a genocide by the UN, so at the moment we're still calling it a massacre despite the large number of people that died. In the US, they recognised this. There were a lot of Armenian people who paid tribute to those who lost their lives yesterday as well. Yeah,
you've just been talking about the Kardashians, whose origins are from Armenia or that region. And I mean, Kim paid a visit to the area not so long ago. The momentum is building up, and this is Israel. This is the leadership of the Zionist Union who were actually addressing this and said it is high time that Israel look again at how it describes the whole thing.
Yeah, it's a good leap forward.
Yeah, the Turkish president, Erdogan, he was talking to the Armenian diaspora not so long ago. I mean, this week towards, and people like Prince Charles were there. He acknowledges and he said, well, things happened, but the Turkish have always maintained that people died on both sides of the conflict. And what we are having now is German, for the first time, the German government, through their president, Joachim Gauck, actually saying, right, look, this was a genocide. So we wait to see what the Americans are going to do and what Israel is going to do in this case.
OK, The National, this is the UAE's paper, as we've just been talking about Israel. Israel's war has left Gaza dry. That comes as no surprise to me.
It really doesn't, Asha. This is a region that has taken a battering over the years. And Israel is almost unapologetic about this. It takes a hammering, and this will take its toll on people on the ground. It is not surprising that water, so the basic entities that we all take for granted here are not there in the Gaza region. So it is absolutely not surprising that we're here. Gaza almost relies on NGOs and foreign NGOs to come in and supply entities. So the life of these people is unimaginable, absolutely unimaginable.
And it's quite a pity that almost every time there is a war, there's destruction, lives are lost. And there are a lot of Palestinians who believe that Israel have a Zionist agenda where they want to drive a lot of Palestinians out of Gaza, and the more people that go out in the diaspora, years and generations down the line, they will lose the ability to claim that they are Palestinians and the claim to the land. Whether this is true or not is neither here nor there, but we know that there's the question of the whole area being controlled by Israel. You can't go in or go out without the permission of the government, and rebuilding is very difficult for these people.
Rebuilding is hard. Obviously, we mustn't forget that you obviously do still have hardliners like Hamas who, end up using their own civilians to their advantage as well. And it's shocking, obviously. Let's move now to the Malaysia the Star. Dorcas, I'm particularly interested in your view on this as somebody who works within the health profession, hooked on antibiotics. Now, we know that Dame Sally here has said for a few years now that we shouldn't take antibiotics because you end up sort of selecting for stronger strains of things, and that the antibiotics eventually won't work, and you're creating a terrible sort of environment for germs to breed.
It generally means, Asha, that the more antibiotics we take, the less resistant our bodies are. So actually, when you do need them, the day that you actually do need them,
they won't work.
Exactly. So it is trying to follow that theme. But in terms of patients, and we're all patients at some stage, we have this thinking in our minds that if I visit a doctor, and if a doctor doesn't give me tablets or even an injection, then he hasn't provided any treatment. So our measurement of health and how we're being treated is actually by tablets. So that's across the board. That's very, very difficult to step away from. In this case, and you see a lot of this across the globe, patients are asking for antibiotics in case they become unwell.
So stockpiling.
Absolutely. So this is weakening their own system should they, the day that they need them. It's difficult. There's a market where the healthcare system has a market system in it. Doctors find it very difficult not to prescribe the antibiotics. Here, if you visit your own GP, it's very unusual that they'll give you antibiotics unless you need them. So there are health-seeking behaviors here. There are mentalities in terms of what our minds think in terms of...
Do you think we're at risk, Tam, I mean, particularly in countries like Malaysia, if doctors don't prescribe, that it could possibly start up an underground network where criminals tap into something like that?
I think the report even alludes to the fact that the distribution network is quite wide. It's not necessarily within the hospital system. There are people who are trading and making sure that the antibiotics and other things are available. It is also close to the region where, from a generic perspective, we take some of these antibiotics out of the license the licensing, the laws there, they allow people to be able to manufacture them and trade them. But the fear is an increasing one. But I also have hope in science that there will be more research that will make sure that we are not...
OK, I do want to touch on this last newspaper, which is the Sunday Times in South Africa, and it's about a particular man who's become the face of the conflict that's been happening in South Africa with the xenophobic attacks. And this is Emmanuel Sithole, who was... stabbed to death. We will obviously be talking to both of you about Zimbabweans leaving South Africa, but Dorcas, this is a personal story for you as well, because your sister died in... Was it your sister who died in South Africa?
My cousin was stabbed in Johannesburg in what is essentially a xenophobic attack. This is, and I think I've been following the xenophobic attacks probably longer than Jacob Zuma has been following them himself. It's very sad. The emotions around the diaspora and the region in Africa are rising. There was a backdrop to this, Asha. In 2008, 68 people were killed in xenophobic attacks. You would think that Zuma would have gained some momentum here. There are wide discussions to be had about why people are leaving their original countries. There are 1 million people, Zimbabweans, in the country. So it's incredibly sad to see a man stabbed before our eyes. The photographer who picked up this was very, very much attacked. But no, these are personal issues, and
we will pick up more on this when we come back after the break, when we have you back in the studio talking about this particular issue and about the immigrants fleeing South Africa. Well, joining me once again in the studio to discuss the implications of this story are two Zimbabweans, the journalist Thamsanqa Zhou and the news analyst Dorcas Gwata. Welcome back, both of you. We saw from that report there that Andrew did that so many now are crossing into this border town desperate to get away from the violence, which just doesn't seem to be letting up.
To begin with, let me express my condolences to those that lost their lives, including Dorcas' family. It's quite painful to see that this is happening, and I think although it is too late, it was good that President Jacob Zuma finally spoke, especially about the role that the neighboring countries have played to make sure that South Africa becomes independent and gets freedom from apartheid. Because it was the South Africans who were flooding these neighboring countries yesterday when there were problems. And I think it was important and telling that President Zuma did say, you are saying some of these people are illegal, but forgetting that there were people, when South Africans were going to the neighboring countries at the time, they were also illegal, and nobody ever said go back and sort out apartheid back home. We know there are problems in the neighboring countries, but it's also very distressing to see people moving in the way that they are moving. And I think now my South African brothers and sisters, I've got family in both sides. I mean, my grandparents are from South Africa. I was born in Zimbabwe, but I've always grown up to believe that I'm more at home in South Africa or wherever I am in the region. And I think that spirit needs to continue beyond this crisis.
Has South Africa, the rainbow nation, had its reputation tarnished?
It has, and I think that's appropriate. That's business relations are now in questions with South Africa, because to me the buck stops with Zuma. It absolutely stops with him. This has been bubbling for quite a while. South Africans, black South Africans, might I say, live freely in other African countries without an inch of fear. So his responsibility to look after people in that country are absolutely his. But listen, there's a backdrop here. A very, very dark history of apartheid. And when we look at these pictures, we're looking at almost the ghettos and the slums in which people live. These were areas in which, through the apartheid system, we're all categorized according to race. And so these conditions have not improved in any sense. We're holding the issue of Zuma building a castle of 23 million pounds for himself and his wife. So they are social grievances which remain completely unsolved and unaddressed. We're having a very interesting discussion outside, me and Tam, and I was asking him very deeply, is there something inherently violent about the Zulu tribe?
Well, let's just remind people, so there was a particular Zulu king who made a speech. He currently denies whipping up any sort of xenophobic reaction. However, the speech that he did give has triggered a wave of violence which started in Durban. He actually has said that he calls for stricter enforcement to the police, but that was never reported. So please continue.
He has authority, he has command, he's well respected, and his word is very well respected, particularly at grassroots level. Zuma is a Zulu man.
Influential.
Absolutely. So if you're living in fear in a slum in Soweto, you're asking yourself, is my Zulu neighbor the one who's going to attack me? Or am I going with my Xhosa neighbor? And these discussions are happening at ground level. At any level, containing this is Zuma's responsibility. And I think he's failed South Africans and he's failed his neighbors. A classic case study of a breadwinner who leaves their own country to go and work abroad and send some money home, and the impact of his loss in that family will be felt in many layers. This is a story for many of us within the region who go into South Africa. Isn't it incredible that Mandela married a Mozambican lady? He was the true Pan-Africanist. He demonstrated to us that it is okay to be friendly with our neighbors. These are terribly saddening stories, and the future of many people within the region will be in question now. A lot of Malawians going back, a lot of Zambians going back, and I think South Africa must look within itself.
OK, Dorcas and Tam, thank you very much for your thoughts this morning.